From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello, welcome back. Our guests today are Buck Sexton and Ryan Girdusky. And on that note, we shall go to our first issue, which is issue 1, Primary Day.
Americans went to the polls this week to select their party nominees for the November midterm elections. Who are some of the victors? Well, while some important results are still being reviewed, one winner is Rashida Tlaib, Democratic nominee for Michigan's deep blue 13th Congressional District. If elected this November as expected, Tlaib will be the first Muslim American woman to serve in Congress. Another victor? More moderate Democrats who successfully overcame liberals in the vein of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But note this. In another threat to Republicans, GOP Congressman Chris Collins of New York was indicted in federal court this week on multiple counts of insider trading. Oh, and note something else. President Trump's legal team this week rejected a new request for an interview with the president by special counsel Robert Mueller. In an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity, the president's lawyer Rudy Giuliani said that Russia collusion wasn't going well for Mueller's team.
Pat, what's happening with Mueller now? Are we entering a crunch stage? And how do you read the tea leaves coming up to November?
I think you look at Ohio 12, and what happened was, of course, the Green candidate, whose parents come from outer space, he got about 1,000 votes and killed Democrats' chance. But the way I read it is, look, there's Republicans, I think, have got about 42 open seats. The trend has always been in favor of the out party. My guess would be the Democrats will probably pick up the House in November. With regard to Mueller, I think the White House is moving correctly. Look, they're telling Mueller, in effect, there's not going to be any interview. You can go ahead and subpoena the president. He's not going to testify before a grand jury. You can wrap up your case about collusion and obstruction of justice, send it up to the House. We're ready to battle it out in the political arena. And I think as of now, everything we know about the collusion and so-called obstruction stuff, it's all there. It's not enough to impeach. Even the Democrats are not talking about impeachment.
Clarence.
Well, we don't know how much they've got because Mueller is terrific as far as keeping a lid on things and not allowing any leaks. As a journalist, I'm not happy about that, but I think we can certainly see possible collusion, certainly attempted around this whole deal with the Trump Tower
But is
meeting
that
and all
prosecutable?
that. Well, we don't know. You see, this is the question. But it's certainly, for Trump to say no collusion, for one thing, collusion is not a crime. Conspiracy is a crime.
Right.
And there was attempted collusion here. Whether or not, we don't know. There was a mysterious phone call that occurred during that meeting that might be Donald Trump calling in.
But we don't know.
He claims he didn't. Yeah, he claims he didn't know
And
anything
what about
about
the
it.
midterms?
So a lot of this is real up in the air. Okay, about the midterms. Amazingly, to save time, I agree with Pat that indeed the Democrats are still looking better, in fact, than they were 2 or 3 weeks ago. There are still questions about how divided they are going to be going into this primary. But the division is not new for the Democrats. Just ask Will Rogers, which has been going on for
Buck
decades.
Sexton.
Well, the Ocasio-Cortez wing of the Democratic Party is not going to be something that helps them, I think, at the national level across the board. It is going to work in some very, very blue places, as we've seen. And I think that both sides are coming from this past week's primaries and trying to extrapolate all these national level lessons, including in Ohio's 12th, where people are saying, well, even if the Republicans won, they didn't win by enough that it's really a win. This is a new moving of the goalpost that I think a lot of people are going to just move past.
That was a Republican district, but Trump won it by what, 9 points, and they gerrymandered it
so here we
to
have
make it more Republican.
So here we have it. A win is not a win. Assuming that it's a win. But
you're looking at it, you say forget the context. Just look at the numbers.
The context can matter, but I also think that they ran a candidate who was very specific to Ohio's 12th, who the Democrats put forward. They put forward a strong candidate.
That's the strategy. You're right. That is the strategy.
I hope it's a strategy, because on the other hand, you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's being hailed as the future of the Democratic Party, and is going on TV and doing in-kind campaign contributions for Republicans.
All right, let's bring in Ryan.
Well, I think the most interesting thing about Ohio 12 was if you look at the county-by-county results, rural counties didn't show up. suburban and in the inner city Franklin County did show up, and the reason I think the Republicans did win was not because of Trump, it was because of John Kasich going there to campaign for Kasich Republicans, and they're the ones who turned out. Rural Republicans are not showing up so far, and I believe the reason they are not showing up for congressional Republicans is because congressional Republicans have handed them nothing. There is nothing as far as Trump's agenda that he ran on in 2016 that has been passed by Congress, with the exception of right to try and some veteran stuff.
Tax reform?
That wasn't a major Trump. They didn't sit there and say, save the carried interest loophole.
What about the tariffs?
That was not the House. That was not the House. The House didn't pass those tariffs. It was Trump. Trump has done things.
Okay.
The congressional Republicans have delivered close to nothing of Trump's promises. There's nothing on education. We still have.
All right, but so what happens?
I agree.
How does
Here's where they got to go. They got to go after the Democrats on the negative stuff. Nancy Pelosi, lifetime Speaker of the House. Right. You got the. They're going to raise taxes and that. They're going to have open borders. They're going to have amnesty. They're going to get rid of ICE. You got to go after the Democrats as the party that galloped.
Which they're doing.
Well,
Which
New York,
which they are doing.
the New York unemployment is so low because everybody has 2 jobs.
Right.
That's
The New York Times had a great piece about how tax cuts are the least popular issue among Republicans, let alone among Democrats and Independents. And the number one issue for Republicans in this election cycle is immigration, something the House has done nothing about. Paul Ryan had a horrible amnesty bill he proposed.
And they aren't going to either, by the way.
So isn't this a reason to vote for Democrats?
No,
it's the reason to sit out there. That's why they're not energized. And the number one issue for Democrats and Independents is health care. And Trump, when he ran, wanted to do something where you buy health care from Canada. There's a lot of proposals and everything, but everything got killed. And congressional Republicans are going to suffer from the fact that they took Paul Ryan's playbook after Trump's victory and ran with it. And Paul Ryan is a loser through and through throughout this country.
All right, Clarence,
and that's
what
happened.
And leaving.
Right.
Also leaving. Yeah, Donald Trump promised he was going to have better health care than Obamacare. It was going to be cheaper, cover more people, blah, blah, blah. Hasn't done anything. That's just not a Republican issue. Just like immigration, immigration is not a Democrat issue, but health care is going to be an issue that really helps
Democrats get rid of
Democrats.
Pelosi and say she's not going to be the next Speaker of the House if they win?
I'm still waiting to see if Pelosi is that big of an issue. Because for one thing, a lot of Democrats want her to leave.
Don't worry about that, Clarence. We'll make it that big of an issue.
All right.
No. I mean a successful issue. Because a lot of Americans don't know who Nancy Pelosi is, but they
will.
do know what health care is. And I think that's going to be.
What happens if the president fires Rosenstein or Mueller?
Before or after the election?
Before.
So it's not going to happen. There's no reason for it to happen. In fact, I think that there's a pretty good case to be made that if Mueller were to wrap up this probe in advance of the election and put forward the report, it'll do nothing other than help Trump substantially. So if it happens, I think that would be really strong for them. I have to disagree with my colleague to the left here on the notion of Mueller's probe being so tight and so good that's why we don't know. If there was collusion that was smoking gun, you wouldn't have heard about it in the last few weeks. You would have heard about it about 6 to 12 months ago.
He's looking through Trump's
no
tweets.
question in my mind.
Mueller's better at keeping secrets than that.
What about if he indicted someone very close to the president in the run-up to November?
Well, it depends on what the indictment's for. By the way, this notion of collusion...
Conspiracy with a foreign power, Don Jr.
This notion of collusion with Trump Tower, there is no way that you could justify bringing that charge when Hillary Clinton paid Fusion GPS through her campaign
to
get information from a foreigner to get information from more foreigners. That is completely unacceptable.
Who did she pay? A Republican group that was working against Trump.
It was not a Republican group. It's an opposition group that was at one point working for Republicans and then took a contract to work for Democrats.
But that's not against the law.
They got MI6 working with Russians on one hand and Christopher Steele on the other being paid by Hillary's campaign.
Are you complaining about MI6 in my company?
This is good, and when this is all worked up with the FBI, this is a big scandal that's been held on hold, but is going to explode down this road.
Don't treat Christopher Steele like an unreliable source. I know people on the right want to make Christopher Steele look like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's had a relationship with CIA and FBI agents for years, as well as British intelligence.
So that's usually not a good sign.
Yeah, I just think that most Republican voters are like me, and they just want to build a wall. Honestly, no one cares about this. This is why Democrats aren't running on this issue. They're running on health care. This is why Republicans should be running on taxes. They should be running on immigration, and they need to pass a bill of some sort.
Trump's rural support has actually gone up in a poll in the last week.
But they don't turn out.
What about turnout?
But
they love the tariffs.
What about turnout?
But they love the tariffs.
He's talking about turnout, though.
Turnout.
And that district, they did not turn out.
I can only go. Despite the tariffs that were targeted at those areas by China, rural support is up because they feel like Trump is punching back.
This is the Republican version of what's the matter with Kansas.
Buck, final question here. How does Trump get those people to go out and vote for those Republicans in November?
Well, I think all of the people that are running under the Republican ticket are just assuming that Trump is one tweet away from putting them over the top, and so far there's some pretty good evidence that that's true.
You got to have the negative stuff on the Democrats as well as I agree on immigration.
Okay.
You got to have that stuff.
Yeah,
to get them
they're going to run a
out.
lot of commercials about the Obama economy. That's not going to fly right now.
All right, we're going on. We're moving on. Issue 2, Info Wars.
Social media giants Apple, Facebook, and YouTube this week restricted controversial radio and TV host Alex Jones from posting content to their platforms. The companies say that Jones has breached their rules by presenting deceptive and hateful content. But another giant, Twitter, did not follow suit. CEO Jack Dorsey says that Alex Jones will be free to post his material as long as he abides by Twitter rules, something, Dorsey says, that Jones is doing thus far.
Clarence, in an era in which social media defines much of the discourse in our country, do social media companies, although they are private and not bound to the First Amendment, have a moral responsibility to allow for this discourse from people like Alex Jones?
I think they have a moral responsibility to have some integrity about their own principles. The question here, though, is why did Twitter decide not to drop Alex Jones while the rest did? And there's several theories running around on this. One is that the CEO at Twitter just wants to do his own thing, that he's not being pressured into doing something. Another is he's trying to curry favor with folks over at Fox News like Sean Hannity and others. But another is that he simply wants to wait and do it on his own time and his own schedule.
But should he do it?
I think that as far as Alex Jones is concerned, it's thoroughly reprehensible. And if I was running Twitter, I would not let him go on. But I'm not running Twitter. The guy who is running Twitter has a right to sink or swim with his own policy.
Okay.
Democrats are the party of censorship now. I think this is quite a bumper sticker for them. No, it's absolutely true.
Republicans never do anything like this.
They do not manage to pull this off in the media. There is no correlation or comparison to be made with what's been going on recently. And by the way, with the First Amendment, let's just separate. We're not talking about government action. Everyone here knows these are private companies. They can do what they want. We're talking about should they do what they want in this context, and also the lack of transparency. When you're talking about algorithms and terms of service violations, these are very amorphous things that are not just open to interpretation, but also behind the scenes, they're making decisions that the rest of the public doesn't get to know about. They have a massive amount of influence. Some people would even say a monopolistic influence on the public conversation about politics, a number of issues. So I think
would you break them up?
Well, I'd have to look at the specifics of what the laws are under the monopolies, right?
Come
Monopoly
on.
law right now.
I
would not break them up, but I do think that this is a point where people should understand this is more influence on the national conversation that the left has been able to have. Silicon Valley is very progressive than at any time since talk radio and Fox News came about.
I'm sorry, the right has no voice at all.
Arthur Schlesinger said, in the modern age, that real power is control of the means of communication, not the means of production anymore. This is going to be a horrendous battle all the way down the road because people are going to complain you're going for the left, you're going against the right. All these companies are going to be hammered from both sides. They're going to be making decisions which are basically censoring one side, censoring some guys and not others. So I think you're going to have this a long, long time in America.
Pat,
I don't think you're going to ever get any unity.
Well, let me ask you this.
Who's being censored here, Pat? Who's being censored?
Oh, right-wingers are always censored.
A lot of them are being thrown
out.
out.
Jones being censored because somebody says, I'm not allowing you on mine.
They're throwing them off the means of communication for 70% of the American people.
Before Alex Jones, there was a lot of other people who were censored, and also Facebook just changed the way of which websites get profiled, which websites get viewed, others don't. I think we're going.
But isn't this editing? It's not censoring.
But I think
you, in your own
what the question is.
Decide.
The question is it a platform or is it a publisher? And I think we're very quickly moving to the argument that people are moving to the argument that social media is a public utility. It's Verizon. We're moving there though. Verizon doesn't have the right to say, Alex Jones, you can't get any phone calls today. That's it, because it is a public utility. I think social media is moving to the point that it is a public utility.
The government will have to do that.
And also, by the way, Google could influence. There was a professor, Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, a Democrat, who sat there and said that Google, just by changing on the top searches when you Google something, could change 2 million votes in this country. It's not.
Power.
We have to stop pretending these are like the same thing as Toyota. It's not.
When you look at the panic, and it's politically motivated, but the panic over some Russian Facebook ad buys and some trolling online, as how that could affect the election. That could change the minds of enough people to make the presidential election go toward Trump instead of Hillary. And then when you understand the very real power that's being used all the time by very dedicated progressives in Silicon Valley to direct conversation, to decide whose voices are being heard, what's being shared, how it's being shared, people need to understand that if you think that that can influence, I know it's foreign versus people here,
But also,
that
wait,
can influence what Silicon Valley can do can absolutely sway the election.
But according to the Jeffrey Epstein study, one thing, the most influenceable people on social media, people most influenced by social media, are moderate Republicans. They are the most people that you could sway by what you post on social media and what they see on Google.
You're going to elevate Alex Jones also. He's got more publicity.
He's a free speech martyr.
Nobody's heard of him, Pat, right? I mean, really.
If you make a martyr out of Alex Jones, you're doing quite a
He's
job
been
there,
repeatedly
Clarence.
martyrized. No, you're right. Over the last 20 years, he's been repeatedly martyrized.
But you know, when you
is that a word?
When you silence somebody in a democratic society,
He's not silenced.
who did they shut up? Let me hear that guy. And millions of Americans will be looking for it.
In the internet age, he's not being silenced. He's just being told, wait, not on this platform, not on this platform. But that's the decision of the people who own the platform.
Being told, as Ryan says, you can't use the telephone, right?
Right. I mean, but that's the question
that's
we're
the
moving to. But
Yeah.
we're moving there, though. Where the
A
social
highly
media.
debatable question.
Yes, and I think that you're going to have to sit there. You're going to sit. There will be Republicans coming out to end the monopolies of social media much sooner.
I want to ask Buck. You've started a new television show in Washington, D.C. Obviously a conservative prominent voice. Is there an argument here that one of the ways that, obviously you are perhaps slightly more rational than Alex Jones, one of the ways conservatives can respond to this
Isn't that
challenge
wonderful praise?
I know. I was like, why, thank you, sir, here on the show.
is to establish their own voices?
I was actually going to, you've now stolen my prediction for the end of your show, which is that there is going to be a huge effort now to build a platform that is either neutral and dedicated to that, meaning that they view it as a utility, or it'll be a conservative, friendly.
It'll never work.
It may never work, but I think this is
There's
what
Gab,
people
there
are
are
gonna
there's
try to get.
DuckDuckGo.
That's how you got Fox News.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, you didn't let these voices be aired out there. Murdoch steps in, moves into that vacuum, and you've got this giant thing. I agree with you.
We have alternatives to all those platforms. We have alternatives to Facebook and Google and everything, and they got nowhere.
All right.
These are giants. There's nothing.
Okay, we're moving on. We will be back in a moment. Thank you for watching that wonderful little whippersnapper debate.
The McLaughlin Group is brought to you in part by Eric.org. With gridlock in Washington, states are stepping in to mandate paid sick and family leave policies, creating a compliance nightmare for companies with a nationwide workforce. The ERISA Industry Committee is fighting back. Learn how we can help your company at Eric.org.
For more than a century, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has focused on growing our regional economy. We work every day to foster collaboration, build pipelines for skilled workers, embrace innovation, and attract investment. We must think, plan, and act as a region to better leverage our shared assets so we can continue shaping and advancing a vibrant regional economy for the next 100 years.
Issue 3, syrup and oil.
Saudi Arabia escalated a diplomatic spat with Canada this week when the Sunni Arab kingdom expelled Ottawa's ambassador and cut trade and tourism ties. Saudi Arabia even, albeit temporarily, posted images on social media that appeared to threaten a 9/11-style attack on Toronto. What's behind Saudi fury? Two things. First, Canada's condemnation of Saudi Arabia's recent arrest of women's rights activists. Second, as your moderator noted this week, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants to show domestic critics of his liberalizing economic and social reform programs that he will not tolerate dissent.
Buck, what do you think this tells us about MBS, Mohammed bin Salman?
Well, I think it's that he's not going to take some JV trolling from the Canadian government. I mean, I don't know what they think they're doing over there. When you look at Trudeau's foreign policy, this is a guy who needs to spend less time looking at the comment section of the HuffPost. This is crazy. He thinks Cuba's great, he thinks China's great, but in this case, he wants to all of a sudden, or at least Chrysler Freeland, whoever it was that put out this initial tweet, wants to start poking at the Saudis. And I just think it was unhelpful. This is their mess to clean up. It's not our problem. It shouldn't be our issue. Is MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, a modernizer? Too early to tell. Something we talked about before the show. That's the new catchphrase. Too early to tell. But this was unhelpful and just goes to show that the Saudis will slap back. So the Canadians should watch out.
Clarence.
Well, I just want to give a shout out to Krista Friedland, former McLaughlin Group
alumni
member here. But this is an unusual conflict to be rising up right now, and I think we're going to.
Should President Trump stand up for the Canadians?
That's probably the big issue here now. How does he deal with this? He's already buddy-buddy with the Saudis, as we've seen. And
every administration is buddy-buddy with the Saudis, to be fair.
Well, everybody's buddy-buddy with Canada, usually, until Trump came along now.
Obama bowed to the Saudis. What do you mean he wasn't buddy-buddy with the Saudis?
Well, they were upset about Iran. Pat, what do you say?
No, I don't think Trump should stand with the Canadians on this or get involved in it. This is moral interventionism by the Canadians. It's their own unique style. They made a blunder, and they're going to pay a price for it. What the Saudis are saying is, look, you guys aren't as big as you think you are. But let me say this. One of the real problems for this country is we're tied in with the Saudis in that war in Yemen. They just hit a bus and killed an awful lot of kids in northern Yemen, the Houthi kids. And this is really going to turn into more and more of a crisis because it is a moral and political and military disaster going on in Yemen.
Maybe some of the elite journos out there who are spending so much time talking about the latest Avenatti 2020 run could spare a little ink or a little airtime on the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet right now, which is Yemen, by the way, where you have millions of people facing imminent starvation, which I don't think has gotten enough time.
I happen to be a journal who worked in Yemen a few years ago, and I was applauding efforts then to bring more attention to it, but it's still not there. Americans don't care about it, even though now our money is being used for weapons. Well, I should say our weapons are being used as Saudi money.
You have a very active Al-Qaeda franchise still there. I mean, there's a lot of reasons.
Well,
we have
a long history of that. I mean, we killed 500,000 Iraqi children. We starved them to death during the Clinton administration, something that Madeleine Albright said was, quote, totally worth it, and Osama bin Laden used that to declare war against America.
War is hell.
But that's, I mean, this is not unusual in American history. I don't think that the president should get involved. I think this is one time maybe he should put down the phone and not get involved.
But I do think this. I think the Americans are going to be, there are a lot of American elites on the liberal side going to be more and more estranged against the Saudis and others because of what they're doing in Yemen. This has been a horrendous intervention in Yemen by these guys. I mean, the Houthis didn't attack the Saudis. They overthrew one of these puppets of Saudi Arabia. And for 3 years, we've been supporting, and we are morally complicit in what is being done.
Our planes.
All right, let me ask a question, though.
Are targeted.
All right, Pat, though, but the Iranians are using that Houthi facility to fire ballistic missiles into Riyadh.
You know, look, I don't know when the missiles got in there, whether the Houthis already had them, but Iran didn't dump over that government and overrun that country. The Houthis did before the Iranians were even talked about.
This is regional power politics playing out between the Sunni and the Shia.
You think we should step out?
Step out from where? I mean, I think we should be at least, it depends. I mean, it depends on where we're talking about. Obviously, we've got people in Syria right now. We have more going on in Yemen than I think most folks are talking about publicly from within the government. And this is, there's no easy answers here. We want a Sunni bulwark with a strong Saudi Arabia against Shia.
For the Arab NATO, are you for that?
I'm sorry?
The new Arab NATO.
I was going to say, I was going to turn to you and say, how successful, Pat, looking back over here, how successful have U.S. efforts at balancing powers in the Middle East been? It's been pretty rough.
We're in five wars, and every one of them's failing.
Yeah. Okay,
we ought to talk about our intelligence failures in the Middle East, because
we're not going to get any argument from me on that.
Someone who briefed President Bush on Iraq, what do you think we should do about Syria?
Oh my gosh, how much time do I have?
You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say, 20 seconds on Syria. No, look.
Don't waste it.
Syria is the second biggest humanitarian crisis in the world still. I think it doesn't get enough attention right now. The efforts against ISIS there are certainly promising, meaning that we do have them on their back heels, but it's not totally suppressed. Yep. We don't want our men and women, though, patrolling the streets of eastern Syria.
So do we give it? Do we let the Russians set the narrative?
I think they've already set the narrative.
They won the war. They won the war's over. They won.
Okay, Ryan.
No, Assad will be in power until Assad chooses not to be in power. The war's over.
I agree.
The war's over.
Yeah, we'll go with a CT light footprint.
Sad.
Mostly across.
Why sad? Why did you try to overthrow him and kill all those people for what?
Well, the challenge here, though, isn't the challenge that if you allow Bashar Assad to stay with the Russian influence, well, let me finish, that you are going to have a situation where ISIS rebirths again, because you have
That's not why ISIS was created.
We're going to go in and overthrow a government and kill people to prevent ISIS from coming in?
ISIS was created because we killed Saddam Hussein and his ex-military became ISIS.
Well,
when we overthrew strongmen is when we had the vacuums of power.
2011
Well,
multi-sectarian corporation.
Time is very important.
How much time do we have to talk about the origins of ISIS? It comes from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which comes from a combination of former Baathists with jihadists from all over the region, all over the world. He viewed this as
But
a
that
jihad
vacuum wouldn't have happened had Saddam still been in power.
I'm not going to argue that was a good idea. I'm just telling you.
Or if we hadn't ousted all the Baathists from the deep state.
Or had we not gone to war in Iraq.
But to bring us up to the current day, I think there is no stomach with this administration, which I think is a good thing, for our men and women trying to put Syria back together. I think Russia outplayed the Obama administration on this issue. There's nothing that can be done now to change that. So we should get out as fast as we can.
Okay. I also think, though, a lot of blame for ISIS, the Obama administration withdrawing U.S. interlocutor and military influence in Baghdad, allowing the Iranians to come in, Maliki screw everything up. Now Dawa, the party of Abadi, is in trouble. We'll be right back with predictions.
For more than a century, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has focused on growing our regional economy. We work every day to foster collaboration, build pipelines for skilled workers, embrace innovation, and attract investment. We must think, plan, and act as a region to better leverage our shared assets so we can continue shaping and advancing a vibrant regional economy for the next 100 years.
Prediction, Pat.
Look, new sanctions have been rammed on the Russians for the Skripal poisoning in Great Britain. I think that was a mistake. New sanctions are scheduled for November on Russia. New sanctions scheduled on Iran for November. And the Russians, Medvedev, has said, look, we will respond. This is economic warfare. I think we're headed for a real crunch with both countries in November.
Buck.
I'm going to stick with it. I know it's my second shot at this one. I'm going to tell you that I think the Republicans are actually going to squeak out a majority in the House this fall, which I know is crazy, and everybody would tell me that. But if that happens, the Democrats have to do a lot of soul searching and figuring out what it is exactly they offer the American people.
And in fine McLaughlin Group tradition, we will ignore that if you get it wrong.
Exactly.
Ryan.
I will sit there and say in the 2018 upcoming Swedish general election that the populist nationalist Swedish Democrats are going to either take first or second place, and it will be another hit against Angela Merkel and the EU.
Interesting. Clarence.
Unfortunately, I don't see any progress on the difference between us and North Korea on the denuclearization question for at least the end of this year.
And what happens next?
Well, more gridlock.
Okay. In lieu of a prediction, I want to send my congratulations to my friend Philip Wegman, who is a colleague of mine at the Washington Examiner, who this weekend became the Steamboat Institute's 5th Tony Blankley Chair, established in memory of Tony Blankley, a former editor at the Washington Times and longtime panelist on this great show. The chair affords young conservatives with the support and contacts to develop their career. You can learn more at www.steamboatinstitute.org. And here's a random fact. 18 years ago today, the Russian submarine Kursk sank in the Barents Sea with the loss of all 118 crew members. Submariners around the world are courageous, skilled professionals. And so regardless of political disagreements I may have or others may have with Russia, we remember the Kursk crew today. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.